I wanted to say, first of all, thank you for the very kind introduction. Thank you for the opportunity of being here. This is a pleasure in all kinds of ways. But I do have to say that my little consulting company, my Futures think tank, only succeeds because of the extreme hard work of my wife, Bryan Alexander. She's right there, and if you guys could just beam some applause at her. She's also very, very shy, so I've just totally terrified her. So thank you very much for helping this pattern of marital abuse, which is a... what I'm going to be doing today is trying to take you forward into the future. This has been a theme of the conference so far. This has been a theme of the New Media Consortium for years. And it's something that is harder to do than it sounds. And what I'd like to do today is take you a little further than usual. I do have to say that it is an honor to address an organization, a community like this, that has meant so much to me for more than a decade. NMC is a continuous source of inspiration, learning, challenges, comedy, and many friendships. Now, let me take you on a little tour going ahead. This slide is a detailed plan of my talk. It's actually where I live, and it usually looks like this, except for the 8 months of winter. What I'd like to do is to take you through, after a little introduction, a glimpse of the short-term future, the medium-term future, and then a longer-term future. And I want to conclude with some ideas about what to do next, starting now. Now, a couple of introductory comments and things just to make sure that we're all on the same page. This talk is an unusual one. It's based on a few principles that you should keep in mind. One is that I'm going to take a big risk. This is a talk about technology. I'm going to emphasize the role that technology has in changing the world. This is an assumption, and it's not one that's universally held. Take a look at these two images. On the left, you can see a train going over train tracks. This is actually one way of looking at technology. We get to ride a rolling stock that goes along a train track that moves according to certain timetables that's fixed. In this model, we have some agency, some initiative, some choice, not that much. That train emphasizes the role of technology. There are thinkers like the one on the right, Kettler, who argues that technology drives a lot of change. This book has an awesome essay in it about how World War II's industrial technology of war made possible the Rolling Stones. It's an interesting idea to think about. This is based on a couple of assumptions, though. One is that we will keep playing with technology, we'll keep making it new, we'll keep inventing new stuff. I think it's a safe assumption. And I think we should take it seriously. Now, there are some things I'm not going to talk about. I'm not going to talk about black swans, except for one moment. A black swan is an extremely unlikely event that when it happens has a huge impact. So you could think about, say, a singularity or airborne Ebola or a World War I scale political disaster or a zombie apocalypse, which we all like. We're not going to talk about that. I'm also not going to discuss most non-technological contexts. Some of you may know that I obsess over demographics, economics, and policy. Not today. Moreover, when Americans talk about technology, we have two big habits. We see technology as a utopian thing or a dystopian thing. It's going to save us all or make us all live in a horrible place or send us to New Jersey. Instead, what I'd like you to keep in mind is a continuity, a serious continuum between utopia and dystopia. Some of the things I'm talking about will be utopian, some will be just somewhere in the middle, some will be frightening. Along the way, we have a couple of guides to make our journey easier. One of the guides is history. We now have a pretty good sense about how humans make technology and react to it. So I'm going to draw on that. A second guide is science fiction. Not only has science fiction been giving us visions of possible futures, not only tools for imagining the future, but technologists and designers are increasingly influenced by what science fiction has already imagined. In short, if you're not reading science fiction now, you are not ready for the 21st century. So let's look at the short term. Let's look ahead 5 years to 2021. We're living through a remarkable time when revolutions are beginning to ripple through traditional education. An unprecedented boom in human creativity, thanks to the digital revolution, is returning storytelling and story-sharing capabilities to people around the world. And powerful changes in economics, demographics, and globalization, not to mention technology, are reshaping education. Schooling as we know it, like they say in Star Trek, life as we know it, schooling as we know it might not survive the decade. So here are some of the technologies to keep in mind, because technological development is rushing on. First of all, virtual reality is now in place, which makes me happy since I spent a lot of work on it in the 1990s. It's kind of nice to have a century break between technologies, but there it is. We now have applications, as you've seen in this conference, to gaming, to storytelling, and visualization. We now have hardware that is consumer grade. Augmented reality is also developing very broadly for basic visualizations across many hardware platforms. So augmented reality, virtual reality progressing rapidly. You can watch the costs drop and the accessibility rise. Content is starting to appear right now. Next, we should think about AR and VR intertwining as the digital and non-digital worlds are thoroughly interlaced. Think of mixed reality. We had Emery and Maya, where'd you guys go? They did a wonderful pre-conference workshop on Tuesday talking about this very thing. AR and VR are steps along the way to mixed reality. Think of computing in space. Watch tools like Microsoft HoloLens and Magic Leap. Meanwhile, in the physical plane, 3D printing is continuing to grow rapidly. I mean, race back 10 years ago, and imagine telling people in the distant past of 2026 what a 3D printer was like and how children can play with it. In my state, my low-tech state of Vermont, we had a statewide contest, a history contest, for high school students and middle school students to research historical buildings, get into primary and secondary sources, and 3D print the results. Are you ready for those kids yet? Just a thought. In education, we're seeing 3D printing moving from engineering to libraries. The phrase I want you to take away is 3D printing across the curriculum. Moreover, 3D printing, as you know, is allied to new learning spaces, including maker spaces. A big rebirth of the DIY ethos is coming and influencing us in education. In fact, these spaces and technologies link up with the often heralded translation from consumption to co-creation and production, which continues. Think now student as producer, student as narrator, student as maker. Meanwhile, hardware continues to shrink as Moore's law continues to hold. For example, my alma mater, the University of Michigan, produced a combination camera, data storage, and Wi-Fi connection the size of a grain of rice. This is a photograph of the functioning device from 2015. This is historical now. I'm sorry. To look at the future, you do have to look at the past. This is already in place in the Museum of Computation. Think how this goes. Let's assume hardware keeps shrinking. This will let us embed hardware throughout our environment. It'll let us do more with projected displays, with flexible displays. Contact lenses as interfaces could well appear. Mark Weiser's great dream of ubiquitous computing, that's beginning to come true. In fact, we now talk about the Internet of Things as a thing that we monetize, that we work with, that we have already embedded devices where we can communicate with our furniture, with our cars, with our pets for the first time, some of us, with other humans for the second time for some of us. One way of describing this world of small, embedded, invisible, and environmental hardware is the Internet of Things. We're already building out an infrastructure for this. We have the IPv6 Internet Protocol. We have new middleware, even operating systems. We're building out data ownership and control systems. This is happening right now all around us. In fact, as one of the guests on my video program said, we shouldn't say Internet of Things anymore because you can simply link together so many things. She says we should call it the Internet of Everything. Once we can put those little grains of rice-sized devices on anything that moves and some things that don't, we have interlaced the entire world conceivably. I mean, think, what happens to privacy in this world? Just a hint, whatever you think of privacy is probably out of date. What we think about data ownership and control. What happens to safety trade-offs? I mean, right now, how much security are we willing to embrace at the risk of giving up certain freedoms in that classic formulation? And what happens to public and private? I mean, for example, right now, we're on Periscope. Hello, Periscope, he said, addressing the camera briefly. What else happens to the private world? Can we actually conceive of private space anymore once anything can be infused with computation, cognition, and network thinking? Remember, this is the beginning of the talk. I'm talking about the short-term future. Imagine, too, at technical level, what happens to files? Imagine an ecosystem composed mostly of streams, not documents and directories. Imagine points and flows, not files. And meanwhile, that most disruptive technology of our lifetime, think about what happens to the web in the next 5 years. Will there be hyperlinks in the Internet of Everything? Will you be able to Google your fridge? Will you be able to look through the world of ubiquitous, invisible computing through browsers? There are many reasons why you might not. For example, think about what we currently have. Mobile apps, streaming video, AAA video games, the learning management system, paywalls. Those are all models that break or avoid the web entirely. Those all offer opportunities for developers. Are we going to go with those? Maybe the web of 2021 will become like American community access TV, trawled by a few humans and increasing numbers of AIs. Maybe not. As Kevin Kelly suggests in a new book, we'll see the Internet of Things hyperlinked and Googleable. Perhaps we'll improve our ability to search and link over time, connecting to a site's prior states, hyperlinking the emergent history of the web. Now, while we shrink some hardware devices, we hurl other ones into the air. Drones are changing public and private spaces around the world. There are peaceful uses for delivery, photography, research, and art. Now, some hobbyists have figured out how to add new devices to drones. Anybody here from Finland? This is a Finnish project, which seems very Finland to me, of adding a chainsaw to a drone. It does work. Americans, our version is adding shotguns to drones. Others, you may have heard of the hobbyist agency called the United States Pentagon. They have added other devices to drones, which are used globally in war and espionage. Now, drones were once largely controlled. Now some are semi-autonomous or entirely autonomous, acting on their own. Already ethicists and insurance companies, by the way, if you want to see if something is emerging, look at the insurance industry. They have no sense of humor about any of this. They look dead on. Insurance companies are already issuing policies about this. Who gets to be responsible for injuries or deaths at the hands of a machine? And you can also automate jobs with this. One Japanese company has already deployed an interesting combination of mechanisms, swarming around a construction site with drones, who then feed visual imagery back down to automated trucks and other tools who then dig correctly. You can have an entire dig that's controlled by machines. Now, so many future trends are historical trends that just won't die, or they seem only to die but to lurch back onto life later on. Some of you may remember peer-to-peer architectures dating back to the 1990s. I know none of you here will have any knowledge of peer-to-peer file sharing tools used for copyright infringement, but just hypothetically now. Blockchain is a new realization of that concept. Not only has blockchain led to Bitcoin, which is an interesting, messy, somewhat catastrophic and transformative financial development, but now through Ethereum, we have decentralized autonomous organizations, distributed, automated enterprise. This, for example, is software that helps semi-automate a function of a democracy within an organization. You can download the code and play with it and run it yourself. One of these already functions as a fundraising and fund dispersal firm. And there's plenty of boring old stuff that you know about. Gamification, virtualization, digitization, digital storytelling, media capture, analytics, crowdfunding. You know about this. This is old hat in 2016. That's the short term. Watching all that blossom and unfold. Let's go a little crazy. Let's look at the medium term. Let's go to 2026, 10 years from now. We're already too late. This is a slide from an internal Facebook plan for their outline of what to do for the next 10 years. Some of you may be on Facebook, just hypothetically, and you may want to know what their image is. So they're looking ahead to increase connectivity. And note how they see connectivity happening. Drones, satellites, lasers, telco through infra, and AI on the side with language, reasoning, and AI for planning. Along with this, VR, AR, which they have social VR as part of it. That's their glimpse. They're not starry-eyed visionaries here. This is a planning document. Now, if we want to imagine how this could unfold, we'll have to think about some basic progress. And when it comes to automation, let's just think about this. By the way, this slide is a cute one. There's a great book about automation from two MIT economists, McAfee and Brynjolfsson. And their book is about automation and says automation is a big deal, it's coming, you should pay attention to it, look out. But by the way, there's some things that we can't automate for various reasons. You know, one of them is driving. We'll never see self-driving cars. Their next book begins with an apology. And how often do you see academics apologize, right? We weren't wrong, we were misunderstood, right? So let's just assume AI grows steadily. There's no breakthrough. Let's assume that things just grow. There's no singularity, just keep going. And let's assume that Moore's law keeps going as well. And let's add in a little bit of quantum computing. I mean, right now, this year, you can get quantum computing access through IBM to their quantum computing cloud right now. There are a few qubits at a time. It's very, very basic. But let's just assume that continues to grow for the next decade. And think about how long a decade is in computer science, right? We can start talking about a fourth industrial revolution. Let's go a little further forward, too. Think about neural networks, machine learning, and deep learning. Let's say they go a little further ahead. How many of you play Go? How many of you play chess? So you know now that artificial intelligence has beaten all of you, right? We beat people at chess, which is not that hard to do compared to Go. This year, a Google Intelligence beat people at Go. That's an extraordinary achievement. We're already there. That's history. Think about 2026 now. Think about Siri's uncanny abilities, right, as a baseline. Think about this as a design principle. Maybe we'll move from a mobile-first design strategy to an AI-first design strategy. Think about what that looks like. Imagine a world like that. And let's just say 2026 will be that world. So you have to think about how you redesign the digital world. How does advanced AI force us to reconceive data standards, publication, information architecture, archiving, human-computer interaction, just for starters? I mean, we're already seeing AI taking up some basic human functions. This is a great project, by the way, if you're interested in health, the American Gut Project. It's a way of cataloging and analyzing the microbes in your guts. And so you can participate by contributing materials. But they will then analyze this, and by they I mean a few humans and an awful lot of computational power, which will already make you healthier. I mean, think about the amount of data we generate besides our bacteria. We generate an enormous amount, a big plume of data exhaust, and that's not slowing down. That's continuing to grow. That is machine fodder. Projects are appearing every day to take advantage of this. We're already seeing criminal analytics automated. So you can, judges, run programs for sentencing now. If you haven't seen this, ProPublica did a great article about this, where if you're sentenced, a judge can look at you and say, what are the odds, based on your previous data patterns, of becoming a criminal once more? People have had their lives changed by that program already. 2026, how far does that go? Meanwhile, if we look to the recent past of 2014, already in the finance world, we have high-speed financial transactions. This happens at such a, I don't know if you followed this, these happen so quickly that they have physically moved computers closer together to get it jumped on the femtosecond scale, already happening. I love imagining Congress trying to regulate this. I have a cruel imagination. We've already seen flash crashes, so think about this. Economic incidents driven entirely by conversation among programs. Looking ahead, imagine increasing segments of human life automated between machines. We could see the emergence of a post-human order in our very human lives. That's software. Let's add robots. Automation means both AI and robots. The combination is extending into more and more parts of our lives and more parts of our work. For example, in Japan, Japan is suffering a demographic catastrophe, which I call living in the Rust Belt, but they call Japan. That is, they have very few children and their age is increasing rapidly. How do you get younger workers? Their solution, not immigration, building lots of robots. All right, that's one way of doing it. Robots plus AI plus 3D printing could actually mean deglobalization. I mean, think about what you can print this year. Think about what you can print 10 years from now, and you don't have to have it shipped across the Pacific Ocean. It's possible that automation could stop globalization or send it reeling backwards. That's a little bit of effect from a powerful technology. Moreover, we're growing emotional analytical ability for technology, so they can analyze human responses by taking a look at your pupil dilation, at your skin color, at the growth of blood in your capillaries. So imagine when we get a computer that's good enough to analyze your emotional state. Think about the many uses of that. Think about when we have the technology that is better at doing this than you are. Will it be a crime not to use it? What happens to good machine translation? Already on Twitter, we've been having conversations among a few of us in Spanish, English, and French. We're relying partly on Google Translate. We've been doing okay. 10 years from now, will we have Star Trek level translators? If we do, what happens to foreign language teaching? What happens to travel? What happens to the languages? Do people start creating new forms, new idioms, new dialogue just to resist being translated? I bet they will. I'm a native New Yorker. I know about being obnoxious. Moreover, what happens if we combine the Internet of Everything with automation and mixed reality? Should we anticipate the appearance of intelligent tools, even sentient tools? We're seeing the automation now of more and more human functions. My favorite bad job of the year is the person in airports who has to go to the automated waitress stations, you know, where they have the iPads that you order from, and that person's job is to wipe off the food stains. Because someone goes, oh, I've got a great juicy hamburger, and I'm going to order some more fries, you know, and they slobber all over this. But that's already there. We already have that. We can automate waitresses. Wendy's is talking about setting up kiosks in case they have to pay workers a living wage. Wait, let me rephrase that. There's got to be a better way of saying that. But they're simply going to do it. It's not a technological problem anymore. Well, what's happened since 1990 that's very interesting, and it happened here in this part of New York State, is that for the first time in 200 years, when we automate something, we create fewer jobs. From around 1800 to about 1990, whenever we automated something, we produced more jobs. So we got rid of the horse and buggy, but we grew the auto industry. We got rid of the Iceman, very sad, but we grew the refrigeration industry. Now, we blew up Kodak right here, and we replaced it with Instagram. You go from 60,000 workers to 200. We're not growing jobs. It is possible that our workforce will shrink. Imagine 2026 with persistent 10, 20, or 30% unemployment. What does education mean in such a world? Meanwhile, we're already seeing the rise of automation in creativity. I mean, this shot is an AI that built a copy of 2001: A Space Odyssey on its own. It's pretty creative. It's hard to watch at times, not just because I love the film, but because it's actually a little dense to look at. But they built this already. Another one rebuilt Blade Runner from start to finish. Already we're seeing automated creativity in journalism, finance, meteorology, sports journalism. The LA Times has a quake bot that writes half of its earthquake reports already in 2016. Extend that forward to 2026. Will we have more and more writing, more creativity? This image was created by Google's Dream, which turned my photo of a pre-conference session into mild psychedelia. If you haven't used it, by the way, go to Deep Dream and just enter a picture and watch what it does. It's a trip. We're seeing more automated assistants, too. Tools for editing and analyzing one's writing, which can help us write better without a teacher. We're seeing IBM's Watson point to new avenues of medical research, and legal AIs help with document analysis. By 2026, will we see an AI acknowledged or even credited as a co-author of a scholarly article? How should we expect creativity itself to change with this pace of automation? The history of human interaction with technology suggests that humans love to revise old forms and create new ones in the face of each invented medium. So we should look for new ways of making art, new forms of storytelling, fresh takes on gaming, and maybe new forms of creativity in 2026 that we simply lack the language to describe in 2016. Okay, so stop, Alexander. This is crazy talk. You're just out of your mind. This can't really happen. I mean, after all, humans want human contact, right? We love other people, except when we don't. We sometimes hate other people. Sometimes we are introverts, and we can only take so many people at a time, right? Quick show of hands. How many of you are introverts? Oh, stop talking to me. Right. I'm an extrovert. You know, we designed the world to torture you introverts. Hi. We'll talk to you about it, right? But introverts are about a third of the population, and they don't exactly suffer from not enough human contact, right? They're unpleasant tasks. You know, do you necessarily want human contact for a colonoscopy? Do you want human contact when paying your taxes? I mean, some of these things we can automate and just move on. And think about geeks, geek culture, which is technology friendly and not always very extroverted. Think about younger people. I mean, I ask older folks, what do you think about self-driving cars? Oh, that'd be terrible, I can't stand it. Ask a teenager, well, if I ever drive a car again in my life, probably won't. But if I do, having a machine drive, cool. How about automation being too expensive? I mean, this stuff isn't cheap, right? Well, there's one problem. Prices drop historically. I mean, VR is expensive this year, except for Google Cardboard. It's going to be cheaper next year and cheaper still. On top of this, we know from economics that the global economy is becoming more and more unequal. We're becoming wealthier, and it's becoming accelerated. All the wealth is becoming accumulated and focused in a very small proportion of the world. Those investors would like to spend on AI and are doing so right now. Elon Musk gave funding to about 37 AI companies this year. So that's continuing to happen. Now, that was the medium term. That's not really very futuristic, I'm sorry. Let's go a little further forward. Let's think about 2050. And let's be open to the full range of possibilities. What's happening in the long term is truly disruptive. We're seeing grand challenges loom like science fiction plot lines. The specter of automation threatens to radically reformat the entire world of work and society, changing the world our students inhabit utterly while supplanting teaching and learning, and that's just the beginning. Let's consider different ways AI could unfold at that time frame. Nick Bostrom at Oxford has the best job, by the way. At Oxford, he's a philosopher, and his job is studying existential threats to the human race. That's all he does. I just love this. You know, every day, let's say, is it asteroids? Is it airborne Ebola, the zombie apocalypse? Well, he took a year and just worked on AI, thinking, how many ways could AI wipe out the human race? It's a fun book, actually. It's very detailed, where he tries to imagine all the possible ways artificial intelligence could unfold. And they range from benign to malign to the simply strange. Stephen Hawking warns us against proceeding too quickly, of allowing a dangerous force to erupt across our deeply networked world. And you've all experienced this already if you've received automated spam targeted at some automated sense of your automated profile. It's possible that spam is the birth of Skynet. Imagine how much more threatening this becomes in the Internet of Everything world. When your refrigerator gets a DDoS, when your sneakers get spammed, what happens when your pacemaker gets a talk to from somebody in North Korea? There's also the dystopia of a world ruled by inhuman AI. This is a classic film. Anyone seen this? Colossus, the Forbidden Project? Yeah. I mean, it's a scary film in a lot of ways. It's like Hal, but if Hal were a bureaucrat and a competent one. Now, there's also a utopian vision, and I think the best one to describe this is the great late Scots science fiction writer Ian Banks. He imagined benign, grand, and administrative AI that simply worked to improve human life. That's a continuum of possibilities for the 2050s. Think about what happens to a social order, right? What if income inequality continues to accelerate? I'm not seeing anything stopping it. We could see two new worlds of work. On the one hand, the mass of humans works part-time at low wages, living at a subsistence level, otherwise engaged, entertained by a rich and endless digital environment. Above them are the 1%, deeply skilled, behind walls of all kinds, the owners and managers of the new digital order. There isn't much middle class between them. Call it the new Gilded Age or neo-feudalism. On the other hand, automation could unleash a new era of human prosperity, of digital delights and technology-enabled offline goods. New political regulations and social orders transfer enough wealth to the majority of people to enable them to lead rich and rewarding lives, which combine productive work with reflective leisure. What one British organization half-jokingly referred to as fully automated luxury communism. That's a continuum of 2050s. Perhaps we combine and synthesize these movements. Technology doesn't replace humans, but extends and enriches us. We work and play in ever closer relationship to the digital world. We're both metaphorically and literally cyborgs. After all, quick show of hands, how many of you have had some kind of implant in your body over the past 10 years? Anybody? Pacemaker, artificial limb, anything in your teeth? No show of hands here. Just imagine how many of you have taken some form of psychopharmaceutical. Think how many of you have antibiotics. I love it when people say, I'm a Luddite. And I say, great, do you take antibiotics? They say, yes. Why? I say, shut up. You know, if you're serious, quit the antibiotics. No? But maybe we can do this. At the same time, though, biology is in many ways the killer app that we haven't described. As we develop silicon technology, we apply digital tools and concepts to the biological realm. New tools like CRISPR give us the ability to shape offspring, to edit life with increasing precision and power. Open source biology, don't know that phrase? Enjoy it. Open source biology gives insights into new life forms and shares that knowledge widely. Here's a recent paper in World Neurosurgery. If you can't read it, it's titled Brain Jacking: Implant Security Issues in Invasive Neuromodulation. Here's another paper to consider from Sci-Hub, from Elsevier, which was about creating macromolecules to reduce the speed of infection within a body. These are papers now. Imagine them in 2050. What happens to our sense of what it means to be human when we apply all these technologies to humanity? Think, for example, about these technologies here. What we consider as human may change beyond recognition. We're already here in 2016. I mean, think about bionics, these awesome feet blades. Think about cochlear implants, which are just astonishing. We have widespread, legal, even mandated psychopharmaceuticals. We have brain-controlled machines at a basic level now. We have nutraceuticals. We're starting already to print organ and tissue replacements. You know the old philosophical problem of the farmer's axe? You say, is that your axe? You say, yes, I've had it my whole life. I've replaced the pin, the blade, and the haft, but still the same axe. What happens to you when we can print a new kidney for you, or repair parts of your brain tissue, or regrow bones, or reprint your ear? Is that still you? Precision medicine via bioinformatics, new imaging technology, nanotech medicine are online now. New devices are giving measure of sight to blind people. A Stony Brook team this year used targeted light to alter acetylcholine in the brains of mammals. What does that mean? It removed some of their emotional memories. We can conceive of editing human DNA via CRISPR and gene driving. 2016, some populations lived decades longer than they did just 2 generations ago. We haven't fully acknowledged this. If life extension becomes even basically successful, how about in 2050, 100 becomes the new 60? Meanwhile, biological indicators are increasingly used in security, retina scanning, gait recognition. With such innovations, after such knowledge, what happens to our sense of what it means to be human? How does public health change? Does healthcare become the leading American industry? What's the public's interest in editing bodies? What's the public's interest in editing minds? None of this occurs in a vacuum. As we alter life and grow the digital world, we also alter the earth. As we change humanity, we alter nature. On the right of this slide, you see the book by a friend of mine, and I asked him to mispronounce it or to pronounce the title, and he sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's like, Earth. I asked Bill, why do you have such a name like this? And he said, because it's not Earth anymore. It's something new. And I think he meant that as a kind of scream of anguish. I mean, I pronounce it in a death metal voice, Earth, but it is something new. Listen to this quote from a marine biologist. Really, what I am is a futurist. Our project is acknowledging that a future is coming where nature is no longer fully natural. By 2050, we may speak of a new Earth. Already, some use the term Anthropocene, to describe the planet after the year 1900. How many of you live north of the Mason-Dixon line in the U.S.? How many of you live in Canada? So those of you know, what I'm about to say is mind-blowing, that the Northwest Passage is now open. So if you haven't seen this, this is the dream of sailing from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific across what we now call the People's Republic of Canada. That wasn't possible because of ice. That's now possible because the ice melted. People go through it now. Multiple nations, I don't know if you're following this, that's why I asked about the Mason-Dixon line. Multiple nations are now engaged in a geopolitical rush for the North Polar region, which is now opening into a new world. A Russian legislator sailed in a sub under the ice to plant a flag to claim some territory for Russia. My family is Russian. I know there's an ominous pattern here. That's just the start. And what happens when snows and permafrost retreat northwards, opening up lands for farming? When the hot climate turns arid and desertification begins? Do more cities become like like Las Vegas? Artificial creations maintained solely by massive infrastructural investment? When did people flee such cities? What changes will occur in the planetary ecosystem when we produce novel and hybrid forms of life? Now, even more, in parallel to the transformation wrought by infusing human bodies and societies with increasing numbers of machines, what happens to the natural world when that world is infused with small, networked, net data gathering devices? What happens to this thin layer of life wrapping the Earth's rocky mantle when we achieve nanotechnology at industrial scale or nanotechnology at consumer scale? Will digital connectivity laminate or subsume our biosphere? By 2050, we've hacked the world, and we keep on doing it. Humans change humans, humans change the world, the new world changes humans, and so it goes. Is it a renaissance? Is that time a rebirth of human creativity and identity? Maybe it's an expansion of our powers and our capacities. The historical renaissance, by the way, was fraught with all kinds of dangers and disasters. That could happen as well. Maybe we have a new politics by 2050. And if you don't recognize these two people, you really should. Think of this combination. How about drones, perpetually aloft thanks to solar power, with big data, Internet of Everything-based surveillance, and data analytics backed by AI that could yield a dictator's ecstatic dream of total social control? Well, do we have a new politics in reaction to that? Maybe in 2050, their great founding people, their great heroes, are Edward Snowden and Alexandra Elbakyan. Others abhor them as dangerous criminals. What kind of politics are described by their fans and opponents? By the way, in the US, both presidential candidates see these two as bad, dangerous people. Maybe here's another sign of a new politics. This is a proposal for casting some urban areas as rebel cities, spaces where surveillance is disallowed. Would such spaces be fruitful ground for shooters like the one in Orlando, or for creative expression, or for both? Would rebel cities descend into chilling cycles of escalating violence and terror, or would they create new forms of social amity? By 2050, has this range of thinking about surveillance become the new left-right, blue-red political bedrock? After we hack the earth and transform our population, do we end up instead with what Bruce Sterling calls cities full of old people afraid of the sky? All right, stop. Hang on. What could stop any of this from happening, Alexander? This is crazy talk. Let's think of things that could stop all this stuff from happening. Moore's law could stop. That's possible. We always look for this. So if Moore's law stops, then maybe the pace of growth ratchets down a bit. If that happens, I suspect we will turn to robotics and quantum computing instead. Now, there's a movement in some countries for no-growth economics. That is the idea that we should, instead of growing more economic goods, we should instead redistribute them more carefully. It's an interesting idea, and my response to that is always good. You first. You stop growing. In fact, reduce your salary. No? Okay. Try and convince people that no-growth economics is a good thing. The people who like this usually have room to spare. I don't think we're going to see that. I think we're still wedded to growth. The great environmentalist Edward Abbey said growth for growth's sake is the ideology of the cancer cell. We still like it. It's possible that we'll have a resource crash, that we could burn through oil, that we could acidify the oceans, that we could do something terrible to our water supply. These things are possible. It's also possible that we'll just stop the technology. This almost never happens. In the 1800s, Japan tried to stop using the gun. They thought that it was too unmanly, not worthy of samurai. I think the 20th century showed where that went. We could have a new anti-technological politics, urging us to return to an older form of humanity. We could have neo-Luddites, anti-intellectuals. My people, the humanities people, might say, stop, back to the old humanities. We could have a religious movement. I mean, so far, most religions have embraced most of the new technologies. Frank Herbert, in his classic novel, gave us a vision of an anti-AI crusade. That's possible. We could also have a black swan. And a couple just to mention offhand, an extraordinarily massive solar event could do terrible things to our global infrastructure. We could have EMP strikes, which are very, very frightening. Or, worst of all, the methane clathrate gun could fire. If you don't know this, in the northern part of Siberia and parts of Canada, there's a lot of stuff locked up in clathrates, a lot of carbon. That area is melting. It's locked up in clathrates that are trapped there because it's so cold. We warm it up, that carbon unleashes. That's like starting thousands of new carbon-spewing factories overnight. That could do things to us. But that's not futuristic enough. Let's go a little further forward. Let's think about the year 2075. Humans we know from the year 2000 are a vanishingly rare type, kind of like the Amish. They're studied by whoever the descendants of anthropologists are. Artificial intelligences busily work around and above the globe redesigning life. The biosphere has gained and lost species and entire biomes. The Earth is transformed. Education and creativity, something entirely new. Some inspired in creative AI and semi-human teams launch mixed reality reenactments of life in 2016. So what do we do? Because it is 2016 and you're in Rochester, New York. And maybe you're like this little kid, a little frightened of Dr. Alexander's slideshow. How do we anticipate and act strategically in the face of such potential transformation? Well, keep in mind, we are not ready. We are so not ready. If you don't recognize this person, you lead a blessed and charmed life. Because after all, now we have a weird simultaneity. We have popular embrace of technology and strong anti-scientism and unreason. We have academic disciplines that are not ready for technological change. We have radical divides over human nature, which we're about to hack and revise. We have political sclerosis in the United States and dystopian reaction. We have political leaders opposed to civil liberties. Anybody here from Britain? Nobody? Britain's been pioneering some awesome things like mandatory filtering of the internet. We have China, which has come with a new innovation of gamified autocracy. I could talk about that if you like. In journalism, the journalists of Without Frontiers have reported that journalism is less free than it has been over the past decade. Turkey actually celebrated Press Freedom Day by arresting journalists. In America, we have TV news. Please stop watching it, all of you. Never watch it again. If you see Anderson Cooper, cold cock him and put him in your fridge. American TV news is a planetary historical embarrassment. It is a disaster. If you want me to make the case, I will, but please, this is not going to help us. TV news hurts us badly. We also have a horrible legacy of prejudice, restricting human growth and creativity. And we also have returning income inequality. So what shouldn't you do? Well, don't think about it. It's really easy to not think about it. When I give presentations like this, never used this one before though, I have people who say, well, I'm going to retire soon. Stop saying that. That's very, very dangerous. Why? Our present generations don't exactly have a good record about leaving a world to the young right now. Hello, 18-year-olds. We broke the global economy. We're boiling the earth. We're ruining our income inequality to epic levels, and we think you're a bunch of entitled slobs. Being 18, how do you think they feel? They haven't killed us yet. They haven't dived into nihilism. You know what they do? They get to work, and they are creative. We don't deserve them. So stop thinking about your retirement. What should we do? There are obvious things that you all know, so forgive me for repeating them. First, collaborate with each other. I know you're in a collaborative organization. It's hard to collaborate. It's very hard to collaborate in academia. And in the United States, as our K-12 population shrinks, we are becoming more competitive. Collaboration will get harder in the near future. Use interinstitutional groups, like the New Media Consortium. Use social media, you fiends. I know most of you do. Make sure everybody else does. Open. Fight the people who don't want you to be open. So that means leave your LMS, stop using LexisNexis all the time, get out from behind the paywalls, and be open. Because that's the only way we can collaboratively think together. It doesn't matter if you open a blog in Blackboard. That's not a blog. That's an embarrassment. To be social, you have to be open. To be open, you have to be social. This is the only way that we can be smarter and be prepared for these futures. And the rest of you guys, read science fiction. For crying out loud, it's not hard to do. Now, there's some obvious things and there's some not obvious things, and some are very challenging. I want you to think hard about automation's possibilities. So think, what can be replaced around you? We have automated checkout, right? Okay, let's go further and think about what else in your life can be replaced. I'm an amateur photographer. That is in the sense of being very amateurish. And for me already, my photography is being automated. You know, different lenses, different things are being taken care of for me by algorithms. That's actually pretty, for those of you who see my photographs, this is a blessing. Think about what else can be automated in your life. Think about what could be replaced. Embrace being a cyborg, both literally and metaphorically. Metaphorically, think about how much you outsource to the web. Think about how much you share with other people, but also literally, think about what parts of you are replaced. We still have this idea that we are big, gooey flesh blobs. That's decreasingly the case. Use futures methods. So build scenarios, use the Delphi method, or like the Horizon report, and use trends analysis, use horizon scanning. Think about the future. This is not easy to do. That's why it's taking me 80 slides. And there's harder stuff still, things that are more challenging. You're on campus, you gotta lead. Stop thinking about having a place at the table. That's tactics. You have to be able to lead because nobody else in your campus, the odds are, gonna be able to do this. You're bored? Senior faculty? Some of them, a few. But you guys, you have this collaborative brain. You can see possible futures. Get going. Inform people in their context. And this is even harder still, especially in this brutal election year. You got to get political. This stuff is all political. Copyright, politics 101. You're worried about income inequality? Think about what Constance Steinkuhler said in her opening address. when she said that if educators aren't worried about inequities, they are not doing their job. So what happens? You want to treat income inequality apolitically? Let me know how you can do that. I don't think you can. When you think about biology, when you think about hacking, this is politics. On top of this, imagine different worlds and inhabiting them. Imagine you, your institution, your children, generations to come. You guys, you help make the future. It isn't something done to you, not entirely. Not delivered like a gift from a cargo cult. You help make the future. Every decision you make contributes. When you craft a creative work, or you teach in a certain way, or nudge a campus in one direction, or support a political candidate, or you tell the story, or dream out loud, or you influence younger folks, you help co-create and shape what is coming next. Don't be passive. It's too late. You're already making it happen. You are all, each of you, practicing futurists and world makers. Do so with open eyes and the flame of creative possibility roaring in your heart. Now, I believe in open, so all these images are cited, except for the gruesome ones, which I took. I'm a recovering English professor, so I expect you to immediately copy this bibliography right now. And I live on the web. Thank you very much.